Hi, I am Sophie Antonio.
I'm Nicholas Marianos.
I'm Mary Rigo.
And I'm Sarah Strastis. We worked on the Aquaponics Project in association with the Hans Seidel Foundation. In our presentation today, we're first going to discuss some important background information. Then we'll explain our methodology for the project and then present our findings. And finally, we'll finish with a conclusion of recommendations and future implications. For our project, we worked with the Hans Seidel Foundation to address the food insecurity of Namibia with the use of aquaponics systems.
So a little bit of background on the Hans Seidel Foundation. They were founded in 1967 and their motto is Service of Democracy, Peace, and Development. They are currently working on over 70 projects worldwide. This is displayed in the map. Those numbers refer to how many projects they have in those regions. And we worked with the Windhoek project site in Namibia to address climate, lack of water, and food insecurity. In 2019, the president of Namibia declared a drought state of emergency, and this resulted in a 42% decrease in harvest production that year. As a result, about 18% of the population is food insecure, and this means that they do not have reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable and nutritious food. For these reasons, we worked with the Hans Seidel Foundation to implement aquaponics systems in Namibia.
As Sophie just said, our project was to use aquaponics systems to address food insecurity in Namibia. And to understand aquaponics, you'll first have to understand one of its component pieces, hydroponics, or the growing of plants without soil. Now, the first step of the hydroponics cycle is to add chemical nutrients to the water. This water is then pumped up to the media bed, where it fills the media bed, where plants can then absorb the nutrients directly from this water before it drains back to the original tank to be reused in the next cycle. Aquaponics is very similar to this, with fish waste replacing the chemical nutrients used in hydroponics. The first step in aquaponics is that fish are fed food. The fish will then produce waste rich in ammonia. This ammonia-rich water will be pumped up to the media bed, where microorganisms in the bed will break it down into nitrates, which the plants will then absorb from the water and use as food before it drains back to the tank to be reused in the next cycle again.
For our methodology, we had 4 objectives. Our first objective was to create educational materials in the form of fact sheets and videos. The second objective was to create an aquaponics prototype design, which can be used in Namibia to enable food security. Our third objective was to create a manual infographic and video of this prototype design. And the final objective was to create a blog that shares information online about aquaponics. For the objectives, we collected data through document analysis and online research. We also conducted several interviews with aquaponic farmers to learn how their systems worked. We then analyzed the data through thematic coding so we could use it in our findings and deliverables. Thematic coding is essentially identifying the common themes found in our research and interviews.
Now that you understand the data that we collected, we're going to walk you through how we actually developed our deliverables. So in order to do this, we used an iterative design process. This consists in the first stage of collecting the background information that you need to establish in your deliverable. In the second stage, we went through the process of brainstorming ideas as to how to adapt that deliverable. In the third stage, we established the solution of the deliverable that we actually wanted to create, and we produced that design. Then in the fourth stage, we sent our deliverable out to our sponsors in order to receive feedback. And in the fifth stage, it was the finalization process of revising that design. And stages 4 and 5 were repeated continually until we reached a point of data saturation, which also means that we received a point of no feedback to further discuss. So we finalized our design. We're now going to walk you through a timeline of how we established our deliverables throughout the entire term. So in the first 2 weeks, it was mainly a research period. So we established the content that we wanted to put onto our fact sheets, as well as reaching out to the people that we wanted to interview and establishing our blog platform. In the third week, we went into a period of continuing our fact sheets, so establishing the actual content that we wanted to put in from our research and conducting all of our interviews, as well as starting our blog posts. We also started the process of creating our video fact sheet, or our video that consisted of the information from the fact sheets. In the fourth week, we went into a period of revision where we sent our fact sheets and video to our sponsors for feedback. And then we started our prototype process of establishing the design, manual infographic, and manual video. In week 5, we continued the prototype process of the design, infographic, and video. And we also continued the process of revision with our fact sheets and video with our sponsor. In weeks 5, 6, and 7, we continue that revision process and we're able to finalize all of our deliverables while in constant feedback with our sponsors.
And now we'll move into the deliverables we actually produced for the Hans Seidel Foundation, which were the 3 fact sheets, as well as the video that covers the information in them, the prototype design, and the manual infographic that covers the construction, and the manual video that covers the construction, as well as the blog where we compiled all of our interviews and some general aquaponics FAQ information. Here's our first fact sheet, which is on hydroponics. It goes into topics like the different types of hydroponic systems one can create, as well as how it relates to food security, and some of the pros and cons of hydroponics over traditional cultivation methods. Now there's our second fact sheet on aquaponics. This one goes into things like the aquaponics cycle we discussed earlier, and how aquaponics can fit into climate policy in Namibia. Now we have our third fact sheet, which is on building and maintaining a hydroponic or aquaponic system. And this one covers the materials you'll need in creating a system, as well as the logistics behind this, and some general facts about hydroponics and aquaponics. Now here we have our educational video. It's a clip from the narrated video on the fact sheets. This summarizes the most important topics of all 3 of our fact sheets in an easily digestible format, as a way to increase understanding and reach the most amount of people as possible.
For our next deliverable, we designed a prototype aquaponics system that would fit the needs of a family in Namibia. When designing this, we had to take into account many factors. First, we chose to make the grow bed 1 meter wide by 2 meters long, which allowed for easy access from all sides. We also included 2 fish tanks that are made out of plastic molds that are available in Namibia, and we separated one of the tanks with the mesh. This allowed us to have 3 separate tanks for the adult fish, the breeding fish, and the juvenile fish. And lastly, we include a protective cover for the system, which you can see here in the brown with one of the sides missing for visual purposes. This cover is made of a shading material that can protect the plants from too much light and also harmful pests. We then created a manual infographic for the prototype system to explain how you can build it. We first included a little background information on the benefits of aquaponics, and also some facts to show how important it is to Namibia. Next, we include a materials list, which you can see here. This shows all the necessary materials for building this aquaponics system, and it also lists 2 optional materials, which were the protective covering and also a donkey, which is a heating system in Namibia that can be used to keep the water at the correct temperature during colder times. And lastly, we have the actual steps for putting together the system, along with some step-by-step photos. We also then created a video that shows the construction of the prototype. So in this video, we first started off by listing the materials that are needed to build the system. Then, as you can see in this snippet of the video, we use SolidWorks to show how all the pieces come together, along with the steps written out on the side. We also attached audio to narrate each step.
The last deliverable that we produced was the Aquaponics Chronicles, which was a blog posting site where we established a community of people who wanted to learn more about aquaponics and hydroponics. This is the cover page that you see on your screen now. Along with at the bottom, there's a little goal as to what we want to get out of the blog. There then is a tab about us, or it shows all the information about why we're doing this project and who we are as people if they want to learn more about us individually. There's then the blog section, and this consists of all the posts that we made throughout the term, along with categories at the top. It has a lot of overview information about aquaponics, hydroponics, all of the deliverables that we created for the Hans Seidel Foundation, along with all of the interviews that we conducted throughout the term with experts and hobbyists. We're now going to dive into one of the specific interviews that we conducted. So this specific one is with Paul Mason. He was an aquaponics hobbyist turned entrepreneur. And as you can see through this post, we want to establish some of the key findings that we had in our interview with him, along with some helpful tips and tricks and pictures of his actual system to try to help people understand the ins and outs of aquaponics. The next tab of our blog is a quick fact. So if people are just curious, what is aquaponics? How do I make my own system? That's a spot to go. And then the last tab on our entire blog is the Contact Us, where people could give us feedback and recommendations throughout the term of what they thought of our content or information that we were providing.
From these deliverables, we were able to pull out 4 main themes. These are purpose, economics, yield, and design. The purpose of the system is why an individual would want to create an aquaponics system. So in the case of Namibia, food security and sustainability were some of the main purposes. This would help address the food insecurity within the country and provide a sustainable method of agriculture. We also learned that commercial systems are popular, and this is when an individual is harvesting and selling what they produce to create revenue. And lastly, educational systems. In the case of the Hans Seidel Foundation, they're using an aquaponics system to educate students on aquaponics, agriculture, and sustainability. Next, for economics, we learned that aquaponic and hydroponic systems are great investments due to their profitability, low water consumption, and fast crop production. And it is also statistically proven that the market for aquaponics and hydroponics is still growing, which makes this a good investment. Next, we have yield. This refers to the crops and fish of the system. So crops are usually determined by the size of the system and climate, and fish are also determined by the climate. And if the individual is selling or consuming the fish, this might be their personal preference. And also one of the main differences between hydroponics and aquaponics is their production time. Hydroponics reach their full capacity at about 6 weeks, while aquaponics reach their full capacity at about 1 year. Lastly, our design. We learned a lot about this when we were creating our prototype design. Some design factors are impacted by the purpose of the system and the climate. So if a system is going to be commercial, it's going to be a lot larger than an individual system. And also the system parameters. This is determined by the size of the system and materials available. We saw a lot of different types of systems. Some people were using recycled materials and others were using local materials that were found at a hardware store.
Now that we've discussed all the findings of our project, in conclusion, we wanted to lead you to the future implications of all of this material. This material is going to be used by the Hans Seidel Foundation, both in general education of the Namibian community, as well as within a local school. We were not able to build the prototype in a local school, seeing as we weren't able to travel there, but they're still planning on building their prototype. And we hope that our design will aid in the process of them building this prototype, as well as all of our educational materials that we provided can be adapted in order to fit the school system or within the general education of the community. We also had some future recommendations of our materials that they are going to be used in the future and things that we learned throughout the term. Specifically within teaching aspects, we learned that it's important that materials are both interactive and creative. For instance, with our videos, they're an interactive way for the material to reach a wider education range, such as people within a school system. Within our prototype, we recommend that the prototype design that we provided is scaled based on who the intended audience is. For instance, it would need to be adapted whether it's a community, more commercial system, or more of an individual basis system. And in a global sense, our final recommendation is to the Hans Seidel Foundation to adapt our deliverables for different countries in order to help with food sustainability in their locations across the world, as well as adapting our educational material to fit those specific communities. We'd lastly like to take a moment in conclusion to acknowledge everyone that has helped us throughout this term. On the left, you can see all of the people that we interviewed who were tremendous in helping us with tips and tricks throughout the aquaponics process, as well as the Hans Seidel Foundation for being our sponsors, and specifically Clemens, Laura, and Burton for helping us tremendously, as well as our WPI advisors, Dorn and Stafford, who were pivotal in the direction of this project throughout the term. Thank you for taking the time to listen to our project. And if you have any questions, please ask them now.
Great, thank you very much. So are there any questions for the team? Yeah, Leah. Lee, how about you? Is that a no? All right. Julia, do you have a question?
I have a question.
Let's hear it, Matt.
What do you think is the most important thing that you learned about hydroponics? Or
Most important thing.
I would say the most important thing is probably how much climate affects the system. Like if you were to build a system, say in our local backyards versus a local backyard in Namibia, it's going to be very different materials and the way that you adapt the system to fit that specific surrounding. And there are a lot of different factors in that sense that go into it.
I have a question for you. All right, so this was one of the projects you're able to continue this project. How do you think, like, what is it that you needed to adapt in order to be able to execute this remotely instead of being in Namibia? Walk us through some of the process and some of the things that had to change in order to still be able to execute this effectively.
I think, go ahead,
Go
Sarah.
ahead, Sophie.
Oh, okay. I think one of the main things was our feedback from our sponsors. That was so important. So getting in contact with them and sending our deliverables, we were able to complete most of our deliverables without change, except obviously building the system with them in the school. But just keeping up like contact with them and getting feedback on our deliverables was really the main point.
Yeah, and speaking to Burton specifically, he helped us a lot understand like what needs to go into a system, like an aquaponics system in Namibia, and like how we can adapt what we were originally thinking to fit the needs of Namibia. So it was really helpful to just stay in contact with them and like just learn from them.
Within the context of Namibia, can you go over some of the plants that would be most properly grown here in the climate and their culture? What would you recommend?
For the fish, we recommend that they use tilapia or sometimes koi because they fit best with like the climate and like temperature that the water would be at, but also because fish isn't usually commonly eaten in Namibia, they would be more likely to eat something such as tilapia. And then for the plants, we recommend sort of just like the leafy greens and vegetables and things like that, as well as if they were to implement a hydroponic system, we recommend they grow some livestock fodder in that so that they can use that to keep up their like livestock like cattle and things like that.
I have a question. How did you guys find the people that you wanted to interview for the information that you needed?
It was a lot through online forums. So we contacted people through Facebook groups, as well as just kind of searching on the internet. One of the people that we found was actually an online educational platform for aquaponics. So we just reached out to them and were able to like get feedback from them. So it was a lot of just kind of like general information. And then whoever got back to us, we were happy to talk to. And we got a plethora of different people with different backgrounds, which was very interesting.
That's great. Are there any we have about one more minute here. Are there any other questions for this team?
I have one. So you guys, you said that Hans Seidel had like different places all over the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of like the hydroponics and the aquaponics, is this something that could then be easily adapted to some of their other sites, or would it take like some major revisions to your final product?
It would be pretty easily adaptable. Aquaponics and hydroponics are generally able to be used anywhere, depending on the type of system you use and whether or not you use a greenhouse or some method of temperature or humidity control. It's all about what you have access to, but most places in the world can naturally have a hydroponics or aquaponics system, at least for a portion of the year, that produces efficiently.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. And I see Laura, I see that you're on the call here. Thanks so much for all of your support of the Hans Seidel team. I know that without your support, it wouldn't have been possible. So thank you very, very much. And give our regards to Clemens as well.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure working with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.